The internet just exploded. And honestly, I'm living for this absolute chaos. Ned Fulmer from the Try Guys, the same guy who became BuzzFeed's most hated former star after that devastating cheating scandal with Alex, just made his grand return after 3 years of complete radio silence. We're talking about the former Try Guys member who destroyed his entire Wife Guy brand, betrayed his BuzzFeed colleagues, Keith, Zach, and Eugene, and basically nuked his career in the most spectacular way imaginable. The same Ned Fulmer, who got fired from the Try Guys and disappeared into the void, is now back with a podcast called Rock Bottom, and the timing couldn't be more suspicious or tone-deaf. But here's where this gets absolutely insane. Just hours after announcing his comeback and revealing that Ariel Fulmer would be his first guest, bombshell news broke that they've actually been separated this entire time. The Try Guys tea just got scalding hot, and trust me, you're going to need to buckle up for this wild ride.
If you want every single juicy detail about this absolutely unhinged comeback attempt, you better smash that subscribe button right now, because apparently I'm your neighborhood internet drama detective, and honestly, someone needs to keep track of all this madness for you. Plus, if you subscribe, you'll never miss when I spill the hottest tea, and let's be real, with content like this, you're basically getting premium entertainment for free. Let me take you back to September 2022, when the Try Guys were absolutely dominating YouTube, with millions of subscribers, successful merchandise lines, sold-out live tours, and a fan base that worshipped them. Ned had carefully crafted his entire public persona around being the ultimate wife guy. Every single video, social media post, and public appearance was designed to showcase him as the perfect husband who was completely devoted to Ariel. He never missed an opportunity to gush about their marriage, their family, and how much he loved being a husband and father.
So when blurry photos surfaced showing him allegedly making out with Try Guys employee Alex at a New York City bar, the internet didn't just explode, it completely lost its collective mind in the most spectacular way possible. This wasn't just another celebrity cheating scandal that people would forget about in a week. This was a complete workplace nightmare wrapped in devastating personal betrayal, served with a side of mind-blowing hypocrisy. The power dynamics made everything infinitely worse than a typical affair. Ned wasn't just Alex's co-worker, he was literally her boss. According to the rumors that spread like wildfire across social media, they were spotted together multiple times in public at Harry Styles concerts, and there were even reports of them being caught in compromising situations around the neighborhood. The evidence kept piling up, and fans started conducting their own investigations like they were working for the FBI.
What made this situation absolutely devastating was how it affected everyone around him. Sharp-eyed fans began noticing that Ned was being weirdly edited out of recent Try Guys videos, and the editing was so clunky and obvious that it became more suspicious than helpful. The Try Guys initially weren't addressing the swirling rumors, which led to massive speculation about whether they knew what was happening and were trying to protect their friend and business partner. When the truth finally came out, Keith Habersberger, Eugene Lee Yang, and Zach Kornfeld didn't mess around or try to sweep anything under the rug. They dropped a video titled "What Happened" that became so viral it inspired an SNL skit and dominated internet discourse for weeks. They confirmed that Ned had been in a consensual workplace relationship and was no longer with the company, but the damage was already catastrophic on multiple levels.
Within just 11 days of the incident being reported, Ned was completely removed from everything Try Guys related. But this decision came at a massive financial cost that most people don't realize. Entire videos that had already been filmed, edited, and scheduled for release had to be completely scrapped. The remaining Try Guys lost significant money, months of content, and most importantly, a friend they thought they knew and trusted. Eugene made it crystal clear that what happened wasn't acceptable, especially in a workplace setting where power dynamics were involved. He intelligently pointed out how women in these situations always seem to receive more backlash than the men, which is exactly what happened to Alex, who received death threats and had to completely disappear from public view. The remaining 3 Try Guys handled the entire nightmare with class, transparency, and legal precision, which only made Ned's actions look worse by comparison. After posting a brief, carefully worded statement confirming the affair and saying he was working things out with his family, Ned basically vanished from the internet completely. He deleted or privated most of his social media accounts, stopped posting entirely, and essentially became a digital ghost. He and Ariel were occasionally spotted out in public, still wearing their wedding rings, leading many to believe they were working through things privately, but for 3 entire years, they stayed completely out of the public eye. Before I continue with this absolutely wild story, make sure you hit that subscribe button because, honestly, keeping track of all this drama is basically a full-time job at this point, and I need you on my team for when the next internet catastrophe inevitably drops.
So when Ned announced this podcast comeback with Ariel as his first guest on September 16th, 2025, and yes, that exact date is extremely significant. People immediately started dragging Ariel in the comment sections. The assumption was that she had stood by him through everything and was now helping him rehabilitate his completely destroyed public image. Comments flooded in telling her she had no self-respect, questioning why she would subject herself to this kind of public humiliation all over again. But here's where the story takes a plot twist that absolutely nobody saw coming and changes everything. Just a few hours after the People magazine interview announcing his podcast went live, another bombshell dropped that left everyone speechless. Multiple sources confirmed that Ned and Ariel had actually separated and were no longer together romantically.
According to the reports, they had separated sometime after the original scandal, and while many people assumed Ariel had stood by him indefinitely, the truth was they hadn't been romantically together for a significant period of time. This revelation completely changed the narrative and left everyone questioning everything they thought they knew about the situation. The timing of this separation announcement raised so many questions. Were they planning to reveal this information on the podcast all along as some kind of dramatic reveal? Did they rush out this announcement early because people were dragging Ariel in the comments and they needed to set the record straight? Or was this always part of some carefully calculated PR strategy to generate maximum buzz and controversy around his comeback attempt?
When the first episode of Rock Bottom finally dropped, we got to hear directly from both Ned and Ariel about their relationship status and what had happened in the aftermath of the scandal. Ariel confirmed what had been reported, saying clearly, "We are not together, we live separately," and explaining that we are devoted co-parents to our 2 beautiful children. In the podcast episode, Ariel opened up about the moment she realized what was actually happening with the affair. She said, "How did I not see what was going on? What was so messed up in my brain that I couldn't actually see what was happening in this picture?" She described the moment when she finally confronted Ned about the rumors, saying that when she looked at him, the veil just fell, and she could see the guilt written all over his face. The raw emotion in her voice was absolutely heartbreaking to hear.
Throughout the entire episode, you could tell this conversation was incredibly difficult and uncomfortable for Ariel. People in the comments noted that she could barely look at him while discussing the scandal, and many questioned why she would put herself through this public ordeal at all. Some called her participation brave, others called it completely unnecessary, but everyone agreed it was painful and uncomfortable to watch. Meanwhile, while Ned was trying to stage his grand comeback and rebrand himself as some kind of recovery expert, the remaining Try Guys have been absolutely thriving without him. Keith Abersberger, Eugene Yang, and Zach Kornfeld have continued creating content, built their brand stronger than ever, and moved on from the drama completely. They recently launched their own streaming service called Second Try TV, expanded their cast with new talented creators, and have been winning awards and growing their audience significantly.
The contrast between their continued success and Ned's desperate attempt at relevance has not been lost on fans or casual observers. While he was sitting in exile trying to figure out how to make a comeback, They were building an empire and proving definitively that they never needed him in the first place. Their ability to not only survive, but absolutely thrive after losing a founding member speaks volumes about their talent, work ethic, and character. Ironically, Eugene Lee Yang recently announced he'll be stepping back from the group after this season to pursue other creative projects. But even that news was received with understanding and support from fans because it was handled with complete transparency and class, the exact opposite of how Ned's exit went down.
The internet's reaction to Ned's return has been overwhelmingly negative. And honestly, that shouldn't surprise anyone with half a brain. Social media platforms have been flooded with people expressing their shock that he actually thought this comeback attempt was a good idea. The comments range from simple unfollows to detailed explanations of why his entire approach is tone-deaf and inappropriate. Many people pointed out that while he's trying to rebrand himself and make a comeback, the people whose lives he disrupted have moved on and found incredible success without him. The remaining Try Guys members whose careers he could have destroyed are not only surviving, but absolutely thriving. The contrast is stark and makes his comeback attempt look even more pathetic and self-serving. Others have questioned the entire concept of his podcast from both moral and practical standpoints. The idea that someone who caused such massive workplace drama and personal destruction would position themselves as an expert on recovering from rock-bottom moments strikes many as completely hypocritical and tone-deaf. Critics argue that he hasn't really faced any meaningful consequences for his actions, and that 3 years away from the internet doesn't automatically qualify him to help others navigate their lowest moments. But here's where the story gets even messier and more suspicious. Just as news of the separation was being widely reported, TMZ and other outlets posted photos of Ned out with a new woman. The timing couldn't be more suspect. These photos were apparently taken just days before his podcast launch. So while he and Ariel were preparing to sit down and discuss their separation publicly for the first time, he was already being spotted romantically with someone else entirely.
This timing has led to massive speculation about the true timeline of their relationship and whether the separation announcement was rushed out specifically to get ahead of these potentially damaging photos surfacing. If they had done the podcast without announcing the separation first, and then these photos came out, Ariel would have been dragged through the mud and humiliated all over again in an even more public way. The whole situation has left people questioning Ned's judgment and decision-making skills once again. Many are pointing out that he seems to have learned absolutely nothing from his original scandal about keeping his personal life private and being mindful of how his actions affect others, particularly Ariel, who has already been through enough public humiliation.
Looking at the bigger picture, the question everyone is asking is whether Ned's comeback attempt will actually be successful, or if this will be the only episode of his podcast that gets any real attention beyond morbid curiosity. Many people have stated outright that they're only interested in hearing what Ariel has to say, and have absolutely no intention of listening to future episodes featuring other guests talking about their rock-bottom moments. The concept of rock bottom could theoretically work as a podcast format. There's definitely an audience for redemption stories and conversations about overcoming personal failures and setbacks. But the fundamental problem is that many people don't believe Ned has actually hit rock bottom or learned meaningful lessons from his mistakes. His return to the internet after only 3 years, combined with immediately being spotted with a new woman while still legally married to Ariel, suggests to many that he hasn't really changed or grown as a person.
There's also the legitimate question of whether he's actually qualified to help others navigate their lowest moments when his own scandal was largely self-inflicted and involved hurting multiple people who trusted him. The remaining Try Guys, Alex the employee he had an affair with, and most of all Ariel, were all collateral damage in his poor decision-making and completely selfish choices. That's fundamentally different from someone who hit rock bottom due to addiction, mental health struggles, or circumstances genuinely beyond their control. The internet's overwhelmingly negative reactions suggest that most people aren't ready to forgive and forget. And honestly, why should they be? The comments sections across multiple platforms are filled with people expressing that they have zero interest in his perspective on recovery and growth, when the people he hurt are still dealing with the aftermath of his selfish choices years later. Some critics have pointed out that if he genuinely wanted to make amends and show real growth, there were probably much better ways to do it than launching a podcast that positions him as some kind of expert on bouncing back from mistakes. Staying private, focusing quietly on his family, doing actual community service, or working behind the scenes to make amends would have been more appropriate and genuine responses to the damage he caused. But instead, he chose to thrust himself back into the spotlight in the most attention-seeking way possible, bringing Ariel along for what many see as nothing more than a publicity stunt disguised as accountability and growth. The fact that they announced their separation in such a calculated, perfectly timed way with his podcast launch makes the whole thing feel manufactured and manipulative rather than genuine or heartfelt. The timing with the new woman photos makes everything even worse and more suspicious. It suggests that while he was publicly discussing his rock-bottom moment and separation from Ariel, he was already moving on romantically without any real period of self-reflection or growth. This pattern of behavior looks remarkably similar to what got him into trouble in the first place, making impulsive romantic decisions without considering the consequences or impact on others. Looking ahead, it's honestly unclear what Ned's internet future looks like from here. The Rock Bottom podcast exists and will probably continue for at least a few more episodes, but whether it gains any real traction or sustainable audience beyond curiosity seekers and people watching for the drama remains highly questionable. The overwhelmingly negative reaction to his return suggests that most people simply aren't interested in his redemption arc or personal growth journey. For Ariel, many people are hoping this podcast appearance was her way of getting some kind of closure, and that she can now move on with her life completely separate from Ned's attempts to rebuild his public image. She's been through more than enough public humiliation and scrutiny, and she deserves to heal and move forward privately without being dragged into his comeback attempts or PR strategies. This whole situation proves that internet scandals can have long-lasting consequences, and that trying to make a comeback after such a public betrayal of trust is incredibly difficult, if not impossible in some cases. Whether Ned succeeds in rebuilding any kind of meaningful career or public goodwill remains to be seen, but based on the current reaction from the internet, he's got an absolutely massive uphill battle ahead of him.
So what do you think about Ned's return to the internet? Was this podcast announcement a genuine attempt at accountability and personal growth, or just a calculated move to try to rehabilitate his completely destroyed image? Do you think he's actually learned from his mistakes and changed as a person, or is the timing with the new woman photos proof that he hasn't grown or evolved at all? With Ned back online and apparently already moving on romantically while still technically married, there's probably way more drama and controversy headed our way. Thanks for diving into this absolute mess with me, and I'll see you in the next video where we'll probably be discussing whatever new disaster unfolds from this ongoing saga.